We are live! Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Mishnah Mastery. We have got our live virtual studio audience tuning in, and to all those watching on YouTube, welcome one and all. We are going to hopefully plow through chapters 3 and 4 of Masechet Tamid. We started it last week. It's great, it's good fun, and we're going to continue talking about the daily routine of the Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash. So we reach the second lottery of the day. We talked about the first lottery last week to sweep away the ashes. This is the second lottery to be able to service the Korban Tamid, the daily offering. And there were 13 winners. Not all of the 13 would be involved with the animal itself, but they would all be taking part in some way with some part of the procedure. So the Mishnah says, Amar lahem hamamuna. Let's get you up on the screen. Sorry, you haven't done that. Here we go. Okay, you should all be able to see that there. So the mamuna, who was the mamuna? The mamuna was the appointed person to the official who was going to be dividing up the roles. So he would say to the Kohanim, Ba'u va'afisu, come and let's do a lottery. So the Kohanim are going to get around in a circle, and then they're going to be able to draw the lottery. So what would the lottery accomplish? It's going to accomplish the following. Mi shochet, who's going to be the person to slaughter the animal. Mi zorek, who is going to be the one to sprinkle the blood. Mi medashen mizbeach hapanimi, who is going to be the one to sweep away the ashes from the inner altar. Mi medashet nes menorah, who is going to be the one to sweep away the ashes on the menorah. Mi ma'ale evarim lakevesh, who is going to be the one who takes up the limbs to the ramp. Harosh, who is going to be the person to take harosh v'haregel, who is going to be the one to carry the head of the korban tamid and the back right leg. Ushtei hayadayim, who is going to be the one to carry the two front legs or hands of the animal. Ha'oketz v'haregel, who is going to be responsible for taking the oketz, which translates there on the screen as the haunch. Not quite sure where that part is. I would have said tail, but maybe I'm wrong. V'haregel, the back left leg. Hechazeh v'hagera ushtei defanos, who is going to be responsible for carrying the chest, the neck, and the two flanks, the two sides of the animal. Hakravayim, who's going to be responsible for the intestines, for the innards. Vahasoles, who's going to be responsible for the flour. Vahachavitin, who's going to be responsible for the pan offering. Vahayayin, and who's going to be responsible for the wine, which would go in the nisuch hamayim, the wine libation, which gets poured down the altar. Heifisu, they would do the lottery, Zachar Misha Zachar, and whoever wins would win. Whoever would be fortunate enough to get those jobs would have those jobs. Mishnah base. Amar lahem hamamuneh, the appointed official would say to them, because in order to be able to start the process, it has to be daytime. Sa'u uru im higiyaz man ashchita. Go out and have a look if it is time yet for us to do the shchita. Go up to the roof, go out outside. Let's go and see if it's time yet for us to start. Im higia, if dawn had arrived, haro'e omer barkai, then the person who would see it would say barkai, which means there is a burst of light. Masya ben Shmuel omer, Masya ben Shmuel says, he'er panei chol mizrach. The person would actually say that when asking the question, he wouldn't say im higia, has it arrived? He would say he'er panei chol mizrach ad shehu b'Chevron. Has the sky started to light up as far as Chevron? And then v'hu omer hein, and then the person who was responding would say yes, it has. Mishnah Gimel. It's now time for us to get the sheep. So Amar lahem, he would say to them, Su'u v'haviu taleh milishchas hatlaim. So he would say to them, go and bring the lamb from the lishchas hatlaim. He would say to bring it from the chamber of the rams. and that was, where was that? Can I see that on the map anywhere? Let's try and picture it for you as best I can. Let's have a look on your version. Where is it? Can we see Lishchas Hatlayim? Not sure exactly where it is. I have a feeling it's somewhere in the middle part of the Beit HaMikdash, but I don't recall exactly where. I'm sorry. So he would say, "Can you go and get the animal?" It was in the northwestern corner. So where's northwest? Lishchas Hatlaim. Oh, okay, there it is. So here, go and get it from over down. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving on the screen, but in the bottom of the picture, where you've got the chamber that we talked about last week, with the domed roof. So at the bottom of the map, it's the second box from the right, essentially. And in the top right corner, I don't know if you can see it, in the top right corner, there's the chamber where they would keep the rams. So that's where they're fetching the animal from. There we go. Now we know. V'harei, we've done that. V'arba l'shachas hayusham. There were 4 chambers in that area over there. Achas lishchas hatlaim. One of them was the lishcha, the chamber for the rams. V'achas lishchas hachosamos. The one in the southeast corner, in the bottom left corner there of that chamber, is where they would have the seals, where they would have the stamps. That's seals as in sealing things, not seals as in just in case there's any confusion. So this is where they would sell stamps to buy libation offerings to then go and collect from someone else. So these were the kind, I think this was kind of the ticketing system to be able to go and buy libation offerings. So that was one of the chambers. Va'achas lishchas beis hamoked. One of them was the lishchas, the chamber of the hearth, which is where they had the fire burning to warm the kohanim. And then the final one, va'achas lishchas shahayu osim balechem hapanim. And the final one was the chamber where they would prepare the lechem hapanim, the loaves of bread. So I bet there were lots of interesting smells that were going on in that area. Mishnah Daled. So before they get to the sheep, the other Kohanim have to go and get the kalim. They have to go and get the vessels that they are going to need. So the Mishnah says, Nichnasu lelishchas hakalim. They would go into the lishka, into the chamber which contained the vessels which they were going to need. And I think, where was that? I can't see if it's in that bit at the top there that I can't see. It's not. Okay, that's great. Not mentioned explicitly where it is. That's what I've got written in my notes. So they're going to the lishchas hakalim. They're going to the chamber with all of the vessels inside. And they take out 93 silver vessels and gold vessels, which they're going to need for different parts of the service. Hishku esa Tamid b'chos shel zahav. They would give the korban a drink of water before slaughtering it in a cup of gold. That would actually, I guess, moisten the hide of the animal so that when they come to skin it later, makes it a bit easier. Even though the animal was inspected the night before, they're going to examine it again with the aid of the torches that they are using to be able to light up what they're doing. Mishnah Hey. The process of bringing the Tamid from the Lishkas Hatlaim, from the chamber of the rams, to the north of the Mizbeach, which, if it's in our diagram, is the bottom side of our map, to be slaughtered. So some sacrifices could be slaughtered anywhere, but since the Korban Tamid is a higher level of sanctity, it could only be slaughtered on the northern side, on the bottom side of our map, to be able to slaughter it. So Mishnah says, Mi shezacha b'tamid, the person who has got the mitzvah, got the merit of bringing the korban, moshcha v'holech lebeis hamitbachayim. He's going to pull the animal along and bring it to the base hamitbachayim. Where is the base hamitbachayim? It is this lower region underneath the altar, a big space there with lots of ways of tying the animal down and setting it, tethering it and whatever, to be able to do the necessary processes. So that's where they're bringing the animal to. Says the Mishnah, and the people who are going to be carrying all of the different parts of the animal, they are following along. The slaughtering area, the butchering area, was on the north side of the altar. And there were 8 short pillars set into the ground. And there were blocks of cedar wood on top of them. And there were iron hooks which were fixed into these wooden blocks. And there were 3 rows of hooks on each of these wooden blocks, and that's what they would hang the animal from. And that's where they would strip the animal of its hide on marble tables which were next to these hooks. So if you can see over here, you've got these curvatures, which are the rings where they're going to be tying the animal. The shulchanos, my mistake. So the rectangles and the squares at the bottom of the image over there, that's the area where they're going to be doing all of this to the animals. Says the Mishnah Vav. So they're not going to be able to slaughter the animal until the door has been opened to the inner heichal, and it's still locked at the moment. So it says the Mishnah, Misha Zachar Bedishun Mizbeach HaPnimi, the person who has been given the job of removing the ashes from the inner altar, from the ketores, of the incense of the previous day, the menorah, and the one who's going to be cleaning out the menorah, Hayumak Dinim, they would go ahead. Va'arba Kelim Biadam, they had 4 vessels in their hands. What were these baskets? What were these vessels? Hateni, they had a basket, a large basket, vahakuz, and a golden jug, which was used to take out the wicks, ushtei maftachos, and 2 keys to be able to go through the doors. Hateni domel tarkav gadol zahav. The basket was similar to a large gold vessel of which could hold 3 kav. Machazik kabin vachetzi. But because of the thickness of the sides, it could only hold 2.5 kav. Vahakuz domel kiton gadol shal zahav. And the kuz, which we said was used to take out the wicks, that was similar to a large flask of gold. Ushtei maftachos, and the 2 keys, echad yored la'amas hashechi, one would lower his arm to his armpit. I guess one of the locks was at the level of having his arm down. He had to reach in. Oh, I see. Oh, interesting. So the key would be inserted into a lock, which was so recessed into the width of the door that his whole arm would go inside before he was able to find the door lock. Ve'echad poseach kevan, and the other one would be unlocked in a normal way. Very interesting. One can only imagine what all of this looked like back then. Mishnah Zion. The Heichal, the inner chamber, had a major door called the Shar Hagadol, called the Grand or Great Gate. And they had other smaller doors called Pishpushim, which led to chambers around the Heichal. Little alleyways ran around the circumference or the perimeter of the Heichal. And there were these little alleyways, these little chambers called Ta'im around the outskirts. You couldn't see them when you were inside the Heichal, but if you can imagine kind of secret passages running along the perimeter of the Heichal. So, Mishnah Zayin, Ba lo lapish pat hatzfani. They came to the northern little door. Ushnei pishpashin hayu lo l'shar hagadol. And there were 2 of these smaller doors, which were I guess in front of the grand gate. Echad b'tzafon ve'echad b'daram. There was one on the north side and one on the south side. So the Shar HaGadol was opened from the inside of the Heichal. So you had to go through these pishpashim, these side entrances, and get access inside that way, and then they would open up the grand gate. Shebadarom lo nichnas bo adam ha'olam. The south side was never used for entry; it was always locked. And about this entrance, Yechezkel said, "Vayomer Eli Hashem." The Lord Hashem said unto me, "Hashar hazeh sagur yihiyeh lo yipaseach v'ish lo yavobo." He said that this southern gate is going to be locked, and it shall not be opened by anybody. Ki Hashem Elokei Yisrael babo v'haya sagur, because this is the entrance for Kadosh Baruch Hu, and so it had to be shut. How fascinating, how interesting. He takes the key and he opens the northern door. Nichnas lata, he goes inside to the first kind of mini chamber. Umin hata el ha'heichal, and from that from that mini chamber, he's going to enter into the heichal. Ad shehu magia l'shar gadol, until he reaches the grand gate. Higia l'shar gadol, once he reaches the grand gate, Hervir asa neger, he's going to slide the bolt, and he's going to move the locks, and he's going to open this huge, enormous grand gate. Lo haya shoichet ha-shoichet ad sheshamea kol shar hagadol sheniftach, and they would not slaughter the animal until they heard this large gate being opened, which was the signal to start. Mishnah Ches is going to talk about 8 things that generated so much noise you could hear it all the way in Jericho, all the way in Yericho, which was approximately 15 miles away. Miricho hayushamin kol sha'ar gadol sheniftach. They could hear the sound of this gate opening all the way from Yericho, 15 miles away. Miricho hayushamin kol ha'magrefa. They could hear in Jericho the sound of the magrefa, which was a musical instrument that produced many different sounds. Miricho hayushamin kol ha'etz she'asa ben katin muchni lakeyor. They could also hear the sound of the pulley system, which lifted out the basin, the washing basin in the Beis Hamikdash. Mi'ericho hayushamin kol gavini karuz. They could hear the man who used to do the wake-up calls in the Beis Hamikdash. He would have a very loud voice. Mi'ericho hayushamin kol echalil. They could hear the flute, which was played on 12 different days of the year. They could hear that flute. They could hear the sound of the cymbals, which would be used in the Beis Hamikdash when they were bringing the Korban Tamid. They could hear the Leviim singing all the way from Yericho. And they could hear the sound of the shofar, which would designate different times of the day. They could hear that all the way from Yericho. And there are some who say they could even hear the Kohen Gadol saying the name of Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Kippur. They could also smell the scent of the Ketoras in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's fascinating to think what the reality must have looked like in Jerusalem and Yericho. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Diglai, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Diglai, Izim ha'yuleveis ababaham michvar. There were goats belonging to my father in a place called Har Michvar. V'hayu mitat shos mereach pitum hakotaros. And the goats would sneeze. I'm guessing it was far away enough. Oh, I've got in my notes here, it was a northern place, very far away from Yerushalayim, and the goats were so sensitive to the smell of the incense. Their sense of smell is apparently so acute and sensitive that they would sneeze from the smell of the Ketoras, even though it was wafting in their direction from so far away. Mishnah test, the last Mishnah of this chapter. The person who was given the responsibility of removing the ashes from the inner altar, he's going to go into the heichal, he's going to go into the chamber with the basket, and he's going to put it in front of him on the floor. Why is he going to do that? Yeah. And he is going to he would spoon out, I think, some of the ashes and put them into this basket. And then later on, he's going to sweep the rest into it, and then he's going to bring it out. So the main service wasn't done until later. So he would spoon it with his hands, some of the ashes, and then he's going to leave it there, but he's only going to take it all out later on. The person who is responsible for cleaning the menorah, when he would go in, he would find that the two most eastern candles were still burning. So he's going to actually clean the menorah out in 2 sessions. He's going to clean out some of them and relight 5 candles, and then he's going to clean and relight the other 2 candles. So he would come to the easternmost candles first because of the way that the menorah was placed. So medashen is hashar, he would sweep out the remaining 5 which had burnt out. Umaniach es elu dolkin b'mekaman, and then he would make sure that those were lit. Mitza'an shekavu medashnan, if he found that the eastern most candles had already burnt out, medashnan, he would sweep them away. Umadlikan min hadolkin, and then he would light the those 2 with the lit candles. And then he would do the reverse, and he would sweep out the other ones. The even haisa lifnei hamenorah uva shalosh malos, and there was a big stone in front of the menorah with 3 steps on it. She'aleha kohen omed umetiv v'saneres, and he would climb up these 3 steps to be able to clean out the candles. V'niach es hakuz al mala shania v'yatza, and he would leave the kuz, he would leave the jug on the second step of this little stool, and then he would go out from the heichal. So with that, Mazel Tov on completing chapter 3. And let's jump into chapter 4. I think we're ready to slaughter the Korban Tamid now. Lo hayu kofsin es hatala. They would not tie down the ram by the lamb, by tying its legs. Ela ma'aktin also. Rather, they would bind it like an akeda. So there's 2 ways that you could fasten the legs. You can either tie all of the legs together, or you could tie the right side of the legs together and the left side, and that's called akeda. That's called the binding. The person who's going to be taking the limbs up is going to hold the lamb in place. And this was the way in which it was bound. Rosho ledarom ufanav lema'arav. So the head would be, the direction of the animal would be facing south, which on our diagram is facing towards the top of the diagram. Ufanav lema'arav. And its head would be tilted to face the ma'arav, which is the direction of the Holy of Holies. In the diagram, it's on the right side. Hashochet, the person who's going to be slaughtering, Omed b'mizrach ufanav lema'arav. He's going to be standing with his body facing mizrach, which would be the left side of our diagram. Ufanav lema'arav, and his head is going to be facing straight towards the western side. Shel shachar haya nishchat al keren safonis ma'aravis al tabas shnia. So the morning sacrifice is going to be done on the northwest corner on the second al tabas shnia, on the second ring. So if we were to have a look at our diagram for a moment, hopefully, maybe. So you've got these rings over here, the kind of backward C's underneath the Mizbeach. So if we are in the northwestern corner, we're in the bottom right of those backward C's, and we're on the second one along. Shel bein arbaim haya nishchat al keren mizrachit safonit al tabat hashnia. And in the evening, in the afternoon, when they are slaughtering the other Korban Tamid, that is going to be done on the northeastern corner, on the second ring in. So that's essentially northeast northeast. Yeah. So I think basically if you were, I think on my diagram, it's basically the right column of the backward C's, and it's the two middle rows. I think that's where they did it. I might be mistaken. They might have done it on the other side. Anyway, Shochat HaShochet. Finally, the Shochet is going to slaughter the animal, the Kibel HaMakabel, and the person receiving the blood, who's going to transport the blood and take it to the Mizbeach, is going to receive the blood. Balol Keren Mizrachis Sophonis is going to come to the northeastern corner, northeast, which is the bottom left corner of the Mizbeach on our diagram, the Nosein Mizrachat Sophona, and he's going to sprinkle the blood. Mizrachat Sophona on the northeast corner. So he's going to start on the northeast, then Ma'aravis Deromis, then to the southwest, and the Nosen Ma'arava Deroma, and then he's going to go to the southwestern side, which is the top right of the Mizbeach, and he's going to sprinkle over there. Shiare Hadam Hayashofech al Yisod Deromis, and the rest of the blood he's going to pour on the southern foundation of the altar. Mishnah base, we're going to be talking about skinning and chopping up the animal. They had 6 kohanim to carry the limbs, and there would be butchers, essentially, people who would be chopping off the limbs and the skin, and that's where we're up to now. Lo hayashova bosarega, they would not break the leg of the animal. Ela nokvo mitoch hakuva v'toileba, rather they would pierce the knee of the animal, and that's how they would hang it. Hayamafshit v'yored ad shehu magia lechazeh, and what they would do was they would flay the skin of the animal and they would pull it down, strip it down until it reached the chest of the animal. Bearing in mind, by the way, the shechit has been done, the animal's dead, yeah? I hope we're clear. They would reach the chest, they would cut off the head, and give that to the person who's going to be carrying the head. They would cut off the kra'im, which is the what's the kra'im? That's the legs. They're going to give to the people who are carrying the legs. Yeah, cuts off the legs till the knees. Very good. Meirak es hahefshet, then is going to finish skinning the animal by pulling the hide over the neck of the animal. Kara es halev is going to cut the heart, which isn't going to be burnt on the mizbeach, and v'hotzi es damo, and he lets the blood come out, drains the blood. Chasach es hayadayim, cuts off the front legs, unasana lamisha zacha bahen, and gives it to the one who's going to carry them. Ala laregal hayamanis, which means he's going to move up to the right leg of the animal. Chatacha is going to cut it. Unasana lamisha zachaba, and give it to the one who's carrying it. Ushtei beitzim in mind, he's going to give them the testicles as well. Kra'o v'nimsa kulo galui lefanav, then he's going to just kind of cut through the whole midsection of the animal so that everything is displayed in front of him. Sorry if this is a bit too gruesome for you. He's going to take the fats of the animal and he's going to place them on the place where the animal was slaughtered from. Natales Akravim is going to take the intestines and the sanan and he's going to give them to the kohen who's going to be rinsing them and taking them. Vahakeres medichin osava base medichin called sarka, and the stomach is going to be rinsed in a particular rinsing place in the southeast corner of the Azara. That's where they're going to be rinsing everything. The intestines are going to be rinsed at least 3 times. On the marble tables that are in between the pillars that we mentioned earlier. Mishnah Gimel, we're going to be cutting the innards of the korban. Natales Sasakin, he takes a knife. The hifrish es hare'a min hakaved. He is going to be, let's scroll down to the English, he's going to be separating the lung from the liver. So the lungs and the lobe of the liver is going to be given to a kohen. So the etzba hakaved min hakaved, and there's going to be a lobe of the liver which is on the liver. And he's not going to move that. He's not going to take that off yet. Nokav es hachazeh unasana l'misha zachabah. He's going to pierce the chazeh. He's going to puncture the breast and take it off and give it to the person who's carrying it. Ala ladofen hayamanis is going to come to the eastern flank. Hayachosech v'yored al hashidra. He's going to cut it downwards to the spine. V'lo haya nogeh b'shidra. He's not going to touch the spine. Ad shehu magia l'shtei tzlaos rakos. Until he gets to the. He's going to go until the two narrow ribs near the neck. Chatacha unatana l'misha zachabah. He's going to cut this right flank and give it to the person who's going to carry it. V'kavei tluyaban. The liver is going to be dangling from it. Balo lagera. He's going to come to the neck. V'niach ba shtei tzalaos mikan shtei tzalaos mikan. He's going to cut back 2 ribs worth of this side. Chatacha unatana l'misha zachabah. He's going to give it to cut it and give it to the person who's taking it. V'akane v'alei v'hare'ah tluyim ba. And the windpipe and the heart and the lungs are going to be dangling here. Balo ladofen asmalis. He comes to the left flank. V'niach ba shtei tzalaos rakos milamala and shtei tzalaos rakos milamata. And he's going to cut through 2 narrow ribs from here and from there, from above and below. V'kach haya maniach b'chaverta. And there were 2 lower ribs that would go with this flank. Which means that there were going to be 2 narrow ribs from here and 2 narrow ribs from there. He was going to cut those and give them over. The spinal cord with it. And the spleen is going to be suspended with it. And this side of the animal was larger than the other side. Yamin Korin Gadola, but the right side would be called the larger side, because the liver was dangling from it. Balola Oketz, he would come to the rump. Chotcho unatano l'mish zachabah. He's going to cut it off and give it to the person who's carrying it. Va'alia, and the tail, ve'etzba hakaved, and the lobe of the liver from beforehand. Ushtei klayos, and 2 kidneys, imo, are going to be brought with it. Natal regal asmalis, they would take the back left leg, unasana l'mish zachabah, and give it to the person who's carrying it. Nimsu kulan omdin b'shura v'ha'evarim biyadam. So at this point now, all of the kohanim are standing in a line with all of the pieces of the animal being held. Harishon, the first person, barosh baregal, the first person who's carrying the head and the back right leg. Harosh b'mino, the head in his right hand. V'chatmo klape zra'ah, and the nose of the animal is going to be facing his arm. V'karnav bein etzba'osav, and the horns are going to be in between his fingers. Ubeis shchitaso milmalan, and the area where it was slaughtered from is going to be facing upwards. Va'peder nasan aleha, and the fats are going to be put on top of it. It's just so fascinating that there's such a regimented and detailed way in which these things were processed. V'haregel shel yamin bismola, the right leg is going to be in his left hand. Ubeis oro lachutz, and the joint from where it was detached is going to be facing outwards. Hasheni b'shtei yadayim, the second guy is going to be carrying the 2 front legs. Shel yamin b'mino v'shel smola b'smola, with the right front leg, the right arm, as it were, of the animal in his right hand, the left in his left hand. Ubeis oran lachutz, with the joints facing outwards. Hashlishi, the third person, but oketz baregel, he's taking the rump and the other leg. Ha'oketz b'mino, the rump is in his right hand. V'ha'alya medul deles bein etzba'osav, and the tail is dangling through his fingers. V'etzba ha'kaved u'shtei ha'kloyesima, and the lobe of the liver and the 2 kidneys are with it. Haregel shel small bismola, and the back left leg is in his left hand. Ubeis oro lachutz, and the base oro, the place where it was detached, is facing outwards. Haravi, the 4th person, b'chazeh uvagera, the 4th person is going to be carrying the breast and the throat. Echazeh b'mino, the breast in his right hand. V'agera b'smola, on the throat in his left hand. And the ribs are going to be in between his fingers. Hachamishi, the fifth person, Bishtei Defanos, is going to be carrying the two flanks. Shal Yamin B'mino, the Shal Small B'smalo, the right in the right hand, the left in the left hand. The base Oran Lachutz, and the place where it was stripped from is going to be facing outwards. Hashishi, the sixth Kohen, Bakravayim Hanasunim Bazach, the innards are going to be put into a pan. Uchra'ayim al Gabehem Milamala, and the Kra'ayim, which were the lower legs, the knees and down, are going to be put into the put on top of this. Hashavi basoles, the seventh person is carrying flour. Hashemini b'chavitin, the eighth person is carrying the pan offering. Hatashi b'yayin, the ninth person is carrying wine. Halchu nasanu mechatzi akevesh lamata b'maravo umlachum. They are all going to place these items on the lower first half of the ramp, and they're going to salt it over there. The yardu uvar lahen lelishchas hagazis likros esshema, and then they are going to come back down the ramp, and they're going to go to the lishchas hagazis, to the chamber of hewn stone, which was somewhere, and they are going to say Kriyas Shema at that early point in the day, because don't forget, it's first thing in the morning. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we will say Mazel Tov on completing chapter 4. And that's all for this week. We will see you next week. Well, please God, we will continue with the exciting story of the daily Korban Tamid offering. But for now, we wish you a wonderful and meaningful evening.